Welcome to our Yerba Mate and Books podcast series. Do you agree that yerba mate and reading are the perfect match? If so, stay tuned. In each episode, we'll dive into ideas, discussions, quotes, and everything that nourishes the mind and spirit. So put the kettle on, pick your favorite yerba mate, and let's get started.
Welcome to another episode from Yerba Mate and Books.
Always a pleasure.
Today we're going deep, into this fascinating book. It's all about a drink. Well, I guess you could say it's near and dear to our hearts, and probably yours too if you're listening. Yerba Mate.
Right.
We're going to be exploring Yerba Mate, the drink that shaped a nation, by Julia J.S. Sarreal.
Such a great choice. Really digs deep into the history, and the culture, the significance of mate. It uses that to understand Argentina, its whole complicated story.
Okay, so let's unpack this book a little bit, right? Starting with Sarreal's perspective.
Yeah.
She actually lived in Paraguay for 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, and that's really what sparked it all. I think her intellectual curiosity about yerba mate. It's interesting because she was fascinated by how both coffee culture and yerba mate culture existed together, side by side in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, how do those two things coexist?
Totally.
So she's coming at this with this outsider's curiosity, but also that insider's understanding.
Exactly. Yeah, and that comes across so strongly in her research. One of the things that really struck me early on was, how much she emphasizes those indigenous roots, right? We often associate mate with Argentina, but the Guarani and King-Kinkles were already consuming it way before Europeans even arrived.
It's fascinating, how much of their traditional knowledge is still present in how we enjoy mate even today.
It's incredible.
The book even mentions sepikar.
Yeah.
Passing the leaves over flames,
Which is, that's still how it's processed. It's surprisingly similar to modern techniques.
And even the way it's consumed, right? The gourd, the bombilla, that seems to come directly from Guarani culture. It shows how deep those practices became, even when other aspects of their lives were, disrupted. But then, things get more complicated, right? When the Spanish show up.
Right.
Sarreal doesn't shy away from those cultural clashes at all.
Oh, no, not at all.
How did they perceive mate?
Well, initially it was negative. A lot of them thought it was distasteful, even diabolical. There were even attempts to prohibit it. They saw it as this threat.
Wait, so they actually tried to ban mate?
Yeah.
What were the specific clashes?
Well, they thought sharing a gourd was unhygienic, barbaric. And then, the stimulating effects of mate, that was suspicious. Almost like some kind of intoxication. They'd compare it to coffee and tea. Those are the refined European practices.
So it's almost like mate represented resistance to assimilation, a rejection of European norms.
Right. And the funny thing is, trying to ban it totally backfired.
Oh, I bet.
It made it even more appealing, more symbolic of, indigenous identity and resistance.
Oh, yeah, like a forbidden fruit kind of thing.
Okay, exactly. You wanted even more.
Yeah. And that keeps happening, throughout Mate's history, that dynamic.
Totally.
But eventually, even the Spanish crown, they realized the potential of this diabolical drink.
Yeah, the demand was there, couldn't ignore it, so they started taxing the yerba trade, to fund their projects.
Classics,
demonize it, but then exploit it.
It's crazy how mate had such a big impact on the politics, economics, everything in the region.
Yeah.
Sarreal says it became Paraguay's main trade good.
Oh, yeah. And it's fascinating how that, creates these dependencies. Places like the Andean Mining Center of Potosi, they relied on Paraguay for mate.
Wow.
Yeah. It shows that these trade networks, even back then, were connecting different parts of South America.
I wonder how mate's role in Argentina's economy compares to other countries. Was it unique, or?
That's a great question.
Is it a similar story?
Yeah, Sarreal touches on that, actually, how Argentina struggled to become a nation. It's really tied to yerba mate, especially in the 19th century as they're trying to control their northeastern borderlands.
Right, which is where all the mate is growing.
Exactly.
So it's not just about the drink. It's using it to understand Argentina's history.
Totally.
Okay, so those borderlands, that's where we start to see another key player come in,
Yeah.
the gauchos.
Ah, the
I
gauchos.
was wondering when they'd show up, they're like, the image of mate.
Right. Inseparable in the 19th century. It's part of, who they are, daily lives, the ruggedness, connection to the land.
Sarreal even mentions Bartolome Hidalgo and those, like, gauchesque writers.
Yes. They used it to, like, differentiate the country folk from outsiders, romanticize rural life, that whole gaucho image. Tough, but also sentimental.
Yeah.
Fueled by mate.
Sure.
Super powerful in shaping Argentina's identity.
It's interesting how, like, a drink can, become so loaded with meaning. It becomes like a symbol of national pride,
Absolutely.
of shared heritage.
It goes beyond, just being a drink. It becomes this cultural touchstone, shows where you belong.
But then that sense of belonging, it changes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because as Argentina modernizes and tries to be more like Europe, the elite in Buenos Aires, they start to see mate differently.
Right.
They see it as, like, backward, something to enjoy in private.
Yeah, in public, they're all about tea and coffee, right?
Yeah.
European sophistication.
Right, like erasing part of their identity to, fit in.
Exactly. But it kind of backfires again.
Oh, how so?
While the elite are rejecting mate, you have all these new immigrants coming in, and they're embracing it.
Oh, wow. So the opposite.
Yeah, they're using it to become Argentine.
Wow, that's fascinating. So while the elite are trying to be European, the immigrants are adopting mate to fit in.
Yeah, and they're changing what it means to be Argentine.
Making it more inclusive.
For diverse.
So it's like culture's always changing.
Always.
Shaped by all these different groups, and it shows, like, mate's power as a symbol of identity, even as that identity is, being redefined.
Absolutely. And that's what the whole book's about. Mate isn't just a drink, it's who you are, where you're from, your values.
And as we go into the 20th century, like, that connection, identity and mate gets even more complicated, right?
Yeah.
As Argentina goes through, massive changes.
Right. And Sarreal, she really gets into those complexities. She takes us to Misiones, where mate production is booming. You see how it shapes everything, demographics, the economy, even like the social hierarchy.
So it's not just a drink, it's like a whole industry.
Exactly, yeah. And with that comes a whole set of new issues.
Which is where we'll pick up next time. We're going to see how mate production becomes, this site of, well, opportunity, but also, tension.
Can't wait.
And we'll look at how its role in Argentina keeps changing. In the 20th century.
So, as we get into the 20th century, yerba mate production in Misiones, it really, like, explodes.
Yeah, the book mentions these entrepreneurs like Julio Ulysses Martin and Pablo Olain.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what was their role in all this?
They were pioneers, really. Martin, for example, he was one of the first to, use modern machinery and large-scale planting. He really saw, like, Misiones' potential to be this major producer.
And then later you have figures like Otto Bemberg.
Right, Bemberg. Yeah, he kind of represents that shift toward even more industrialization. He's got these big estates, brings in European immigrants to work the plantations, like, totally transforms Misiones.
So there's this tension then between, like, the traditional way and this modern almost industrial production.
Absolutely. And it plays out in all these ways. Like Sarreal talks about, the big companies, they're often clashing with the small farmers, fighting for, control of the market.
And what about those traditional communities, like the ones who'd been growing yerba for, generations?
Right.
Did they adapt? Or...
Yeah, that's a really important point. And Sarreal doesn't, gloss over it. She talks about how the European immigrants, they bring labor, but they also displace indigenous communities.
Right. So it's progress, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah. And those costs are often borne by, the most vulnerable.
And it's not just them, right?
Yeah.
The book talks about the workers on the plantations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those conditions were pretty rough.
That's where journalists like Julien Bouvier and Raphael Barrett come in.
Right.
They were the ones who exposed those conditions, right?
They really shone a light on, the exploitation, the living conditions, lack of any kind of worker protections, really. Their accounts, sometimes they were a little sensationalized,
right?
But they helped raise awareness of that darker side.
So even while mate is like this national drink, there's this underlying tension.
Yeah, absolutely.
About, fair treatment, distribution of wealth.
It's always there.
And then you have all the political stuff happening in Argentina.
Right.
Peronism, military rule, back to democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did all that impact Yerba Mate?
Well, it's interesting. Sarreal argues that, mate's popularity actually went down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, after the middle of the century. Partly because it got associated with poverty, rural life.
It's funny how something that was like a symbol of pride
I know, right?
becomes almost like a stigma.
Yeah, it was seen as like outdated, didn't fit with this, modern, sophisticated image they wanted.
But then it comes back in
Right.
the 90s.
Exactly. And it's tied to, another economic crisis. It's like people, they kind of turn back to mate for comfort, something familiar, affordable.
So it's more than just a drink then. It's about resilience, shared heritage, like those values that get you through tough times.
Exactly. And that leads to the last part of Sarreal's book, which is about the tractor protests of 2001.
Oh yeah, that was a big moment.
Mm-hmm.
What was Mate's role in all that?
Well, those protests, they were mostly driven by mate growers. They were struggling, Prices were down, no support from the government.
So they used their tractors.
Yeah, tractors as symbol.
And mate too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Sharing it, offering it to people, it was central.
It's like they were reclaiming it.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is our livelihood, this is our identity.
Exactly. It wasn't just about the economics. It was about, their place in society, demanding respect.
It really shows how mate is woven into like the fabric of Argentina.
Yeah, from the very beginning.
Indigenous roots to, colonialism to modern economics.
It's all connected, and it brings us back to that question that Sarreal asked, right? How has mate shaped Argentina? And how has Argentina shaped mate?
It's a great question. Makes you think about, culture, identity, history.
Yeah.
And how like everyday things can tell those stories.
It really makes you look at even the things in your own life differently. What stories are they holding? How have they changed us? How have we changed them?
Thinking about those tractor protests, it really struck me how they kind of brought together all these different parts of Mate's history.
Yeah, that's true.
The indigenous roots, then the whole colonial period, the economic struggles, and this strong sense of identity all at once.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how mate, it's not just a drink,
Right.
It's the symbol, it's an economic thing, it's how people make a living, it can even spark change.
And it's fascinating to see how all those different sides of mate have played out over time.
Right.
One thing that really stayed with me was how Sarreal, traced how the image of mate changed.
Right.
It starts as an indigenous beverage, then the Spanish demonize it, the gauchos embrace it, and then almost like the Argentine elite reject it.
They want it to be modern, right?
Right, exactly.
It's like mate went on this crazy journey,
Yeah. It's like a roller coaster of perception, reflecting like what Argentine society valued.
Exactly.
And then you get this full circle moment, with the tractor protests.
Yeah.
The people who were once like pushed aside because of mate, they're using it to demand respect.
It is powerful.
It really shows that culture is never like set in stone.
Never.
It's always being reshaped, redefined.
By the people living it.
And a lot of times those reinterpretations happen during like crises when people are looking for meaning.
Totally. And I think that's one of the big takeaways from Sarreal's book, Yerba Mate. It shows us Argentina's history, all its complexity, even the contradictions.
Right. It's tradition and change, exploitation and resilience, this national pride, but also like personal connection.
Exactly. And it's a story that's still going.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at Mate now. It's having this global moment.
I know. What do you think that says about why people are drawn to it?
I think it's this desire for like authenticity, for connection, something real in a world that's so digital, so fast.
That's true.
There's something about, preparing mate, sharing it. It slows you down, makes you be present.
And that appeals to, everyone. Doesn't matter where you're from.
It's a good reminder, even when we're all like hyper-connected, we still want that human connection, those moments we share that go beyond, language borders.
I love that.
So for anyone listening who wants to like explore mate more, what would you suggest? Where should they start?
Well, I mean, obviously read Julia J.S. Sarreal's book, Yerba Mate, The Drink That Shaped a Nation.
Right, of course.
It's a great way to learn about it, the history, the culture. But really, I just say, try it. Try mate. Experiment with different ways of making it. Find a gourd and bombilla you love. Share it with friends.
It's all about the experience, that journey of discovery.
Exactly.
Who knows, maybe you'll even find some hidden stories of your own along the way.
Until next time, keep sipping that mate and keep exploring.